Good evening. I'm calling the Wednesday, March 8th, 2023 Economic Development Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Economic Development Commission meeting will be held hybrid for public using Zoom. Commission members and staff will be participating in the meeting in person. As chair, I will be leading the Economic Development Commission meeting, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting by joining via online Zoom at https://zoom.us/join and typing in meeting ID 830-6785-0539. That's 830-6785-0539. Once you are logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to. You may also call into the meeting at 651-372-8299 and enter meeting ID 830-6785-0539. Both IDs are the same. Now on to the agenda. First item on the agenda tonight is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Chair, so because we don't have a quorum tonight, we will have to forego approval of the agenda and minutes and move directly on to what would have been item number 3, and we'll proceed just as an informational meeting tonight with no voting occurring.
Okay. The third item on the agenda is the open to business overview and update. Beth Weber is here to introduce our presenter tonight. This item is for information and discussion purposes only, and no motion or recommendations is required at this time.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight we have with us Natalie Malso. She is our Open to Business Advisor for the city, representing us and Dakota County as a whole. So she will be presenting some updates from the Open to Business program and just giving us some new information.
Thank you, Beth, for the introduction, and thank you to the Commission for having me tonight. My name is Natalie Malso. I'm a business advisor for Dakota County. I work with businesses that are established throughout the county and also folks that are just getting started with new businesses as well. So tonight I'm going to talk about a little background about the program itself. We'll hear from some business owners that have utilized the program and have benefited from the program, and we'll also talk about the outcomes from 2022 for the county as a whole, and then specifically for the city of Burnsville. And then just a couple of highlights about what is coming up in 2023. So just a bit of background about MCCD, which is the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. They are a nonprofit organization. It's a 501c3. They operate the Open to Business program to provide this assistance and access to capital to entrepreneurs throughout the region. We've been active in Dakota County since 2013, so going on 10 years now, which is so cool just to look back and see all the businesses that we've impacted here in the county. Our consultants work with business owners to provide this technical assistance and, again, the access to capital piece. So we work with businesses really of all shapes and sizes. Every business is unique with their own unique opportunities and their own unique challenges, of course. At the Open to Business program, we really focus on meeting clients where they're at in terms of their skill level, their goals for their business, their priorities. A lot of business owners are juggling a lot of different things, family, maybe multiple businesses, maybe other employment as well. So, you know, we really try and listen first and tailor the assistance that we provide to the business owner. Because of the support from the city and from the county, this is an absolutely free service. for business owners and for entrepreneurs. Anything that we discuss with business owners, it's all confidential, and we can go over a very wide, broad range of topics, ranging from, for folks that are just starting out, maybe they need to work on their business plan, financial projections. Other folks that are maybe second stage businesses, or they're in growth mode, they're thinking about other things, taking on maybe their first employee, maybe a second location, things like that. So it's a very diverse program and can be customized to really meet the needs of the businesses that we work with. In addition to the business assistance, we do have lending capabilities as well through the program. We sort of look at that in two separate buckets. There's direct lending, so that would be loans that MCCD and Open to Business makes directly to business owners and entrepreneurs, and then there's also participation financing. And in terms of the direct loans, this really is targeted at startup or early stage businesses. So this would be businesses that either are too new to work with a bank or just too small to work with a bank. A lot of banks they're just not set up really to do this startup lending, so we're filling a gap there by providing this. And for retail or service businesses, we can lend up to $25,000 for a startup, $50,000 for a manufacturing business, and then we also do much smaller loans too. Sometimes businesses just need a few $1,000s to, for some inventory or working capital, or, just to open their doors. So we absolutely do loans of any size. And then in terms of the participation financing, this is really when we partner with other financial institutions in the community to make larger projects happen that really wouldn't be able to happen without our participation. So this can also take a lot of different shapes and sizes. A lot of times it's real estate, oriented projects, but the bank or the financial institution would do, they would do their underwriting and then bring us in to fill a gap between the equity that the business owner has and then the portion that the bank can do. So whether that's 5%, 10%, maybe a little bit more sometimes, but we can come in and make these projects happen, which is really fun to leverage those dollars and to help our financial institutions think creatively about these projects. We do take a subordinated position in terms of collateral and repayment on these loans. So it's just a great tool for these financial institutions to have sort of in their back pocket when they're talking to clients and talking to business owners, to know that this is a possibility for them. And now, just to sort of put a face, a couple of faces to the program, last year I worked with Beth and the city to put together a wonderful profile video about the program itself, and we interviewed some of the clients that had benefited from the program. So this might be familiar to you. It is on the Burnsville website, but we wanted to show it again tonight just because it paints a really, it just paints a picture of the program and the types of services we provide and the businesses that we've helped right here in Burnsville.
The Open to Business program is a partnership between the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers and the cities and the counties that participate in the program. The program is a complete suite of services, direct one-on-one technical assistance, direct lending, and also partnership financing with banks and financial institutions in the community. In just the past 5 years, we have worked with more than 85 small businesses in the city of Burnsville. Those businesses received 500 direct technical assistance hours, and we made loans totaling $770,000. Those loans were leveraged to bring more than $6 million of financing from traditional lenders to the city of Burnsville.
The partnership between the Dakota County Community Development Agency, Open to Business, and the City of Burnsville helps us meet our goals of providing impactful programming and resources for our local businesses.
My business is work to finishing cabinets. We work for contractors, cabinet makers, individual people too. My principal work is paint cabinets, paint doors, windows, finishing. When the Hispanic people or the minority people need help for growing and something like that, the big banks never help you. You know, and you need to start looking something like the open business, because start my business with my own money, credit card and all savings, and they help me with a loan to try to keep open, and after that they give me more loans to growing more.
I have a business which is called Stunning Beauty Supply. It is a beauty supply store that sells hair care products. Some of the resources that I used was the micro grant program. My grant money that I won is going to go towards a few more inventory items. It's also going to help us to get a computer to finally be able to run our business from a computer and not from my phone. And it's also going to help with marketing and signages that people would be able to find us within this building. I feel if I hadn't found Open to Business, I would have been lost. I would have been struggling online, trying to find sales, going door to door, just trying to market myself. It would have been extremely difficult, and I'm thankful that I found you guys.
Well, the Humanitarian Kitten is my business, and it is a business that is intended to raise funds so that I can donate quilts, donate other items that have been made to soldiers, to hospitals, etc. The program has helped me notably, especially in the beginning phases when I really had no clue what I was doing, if I needed licenses. What about Etsy? What about an accountant? And then I would say personally for myself, most importantly, is just the confidence that I can do it. Like I said, I registered for my LLC and really just thought, now what am I doing? And so to know you're not in it alone completely, to know that you have that support, you have someone you can go out to me, priceless, and the biggest thing I got out of it.
The City of Burnsville is committed to meaningful relationships and experiences that meet the diverse needs of our community. Working with Open to Business allows us to provide a free service to help our local entrepreneurs establish and grow their businesses.
Don't go it alone. Contact Open to Business, visit our website, or reach out to the city to get started.
It's just kind of shutting me out. Sorry. I click back on the video, it just starts.
The Open to Business program.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So yes, so that video, like I said, it just really paints a lovely a picture of some of the clients that have utilized the program. Again, everything we do is confidential, so the fact that those 3 clients felt so passionately about the program that they wanted to go and work with us to be filmed was really special. So now looking at 2022, the county as a whole, just some outcomes here. You can see we served 170 clients throughout the whole county. More than 1,000 direct technical assistance hours were provided. That's my time one-on-one working with these business owners. In addition, we had nearly 800 program hours, and that would be the time I spend kind of back of office, working on marketing material and strategizing with the city, things like that. $576,000 in direct loans throughout the county. That does include about $30,000 in forgivable loans, which was something that we were able to do because of some funding that we raised through private philanthropy. So we were able to do those forgivable loans. The direct loans leveraged $593,000 in equity from the business owners, and about $5.6 million in capital facilitated throughout the county, which is just pretty remarkable when you think about the investment from MCCD and the city and just leveraging all those dollars for the county. We talked about the forgivable loans. We really did prioritize keeping our pricing as low as possible in terms of the interest rates. Interest rates were going, up last year. They still are. We're able to keep that cap for startup lending in terms of the interest rate at 7%, which right now is lower, than what someone would get when they go and talk to a bank. That's because of a very large grant that we received in 2021 from the U.S. Department of the Treasury. That was at no cost to us. It was grant dollars to our organization, and we were able to keep that money and be able to lend it out to business owners at a very low rate, even as other rates are going up. We've also done a lot of fundraising to keep our rates as low as possible too. We've added capacity throughout the year. We've got interns. We have a lovely partnership with the Humphrey School, and we've got fellows through that as well, adding to our capacity. We've added working with some accountants to provide that support. Every open to business client gets up to 10 free hours of accounting support, which is just huge for folks that are starting out. Maybe they don't know where to begin with their bookkeeping or accounting, and that's just a great tool for them because they may not be able to, work with an accountant outside of that. We were actually just awarded this new recognition with Minnesota's new loan guarantee program. We're involved in that now, which is very exciting. And we're working with the Department of Human Services in the state of Minnesota for a new program on home and community-based services, and that's a grant program to help folks that are in that field establish employee-owned business models and to help kind of fill that gap in the workforce, because that's just historically a very difficult area to staff. And then in the state, or in the city of Minneapolis, we're working on a payroll subsidy pilot program to help folks stay in compliance there. So running that sort of as a test case, and then hopefully branching out a little bit more broadly and bringing that to other cities as well. So looking at Burnsville specifically, last year we served 26 businesses. More than half of them were women-owned businesses. About a third were low-wealth businesses, and 64% were BIPOC or immigrant-owned businesses. 10 of those businesses were existing, 16 were startups, and we did see a pretty significant uptick in demand from startup businesses like towards the end of last year, and absolutely in 2023. I'll talk more about that later. 125 technical assistance hours, and then of course always ongoing service and support to the Burnsville clients that we have in our loan portfolio. We awarded 2 micro grants to Burnsville businesses for $6,500, and in terms of new lending, we have $125,000 in a direct loan that helped to leverage $125,000 in owner equity, and almost $2 million in capital that was raised from, I believe, the SBA and bank financing. In terms of referral sources, the city is always our best referral source, and so more than half of our referrals came directly from the city, so folks reaching out to the city and then getting my information that way. Also, just a lot of folks finding us online, and then, certainly that word of mouth, maybe an existing client had a great experience, or they're talking to their friend or their neighbor. Also, increasing awareness with other partners in the community and other bankers in the community, and just folks that are talking to businesses on the day-to-day. And in terms of the industries, we always tend to have kind of the skew in the retail and the service industry, just because the barriers to entry are a little bit lower for those industries, but did see more, consulting businesses and businesses structured that way, and then a few other business types, food businesses, manufacturing as well. And then in terms of topics, bookkeeping and record keeping, accounting, that piece is always top of mind for folks. Access to capital and lending, we answer a lot of those questions, helping folks with marketing, business plan developments for those startup businesses, a lot of leasing questions, people are moving around, to bigger spaces, better spaces, things like that, buying and selling real estate, the loan that we did with the Burnsville business, that was to purchase new real estate, and people buying businesses or selling businesses, so just a lot of transactions happening. This is a client profile. This is one of our micro grant recipients from last year, and I just wanted to include the lovely quote that she had here about the grant that she received. Her name is Lynn. She's a photographer, and she owns her own business, Photos by Lynn. She learned about the Open to Business program through the city's newsletter, and she reached out. She's a retired special education teacher, and she's always kind of had this passion for photography on the side, and in her retirement wanted to bring that back as a source of income. After a few setbacks, she wanted to restart her business last year, and the micro grant allowed her to get new supplies, registration fees for some of the different fairs and things that she participates in so that she can sell her photos. And this just really gives her a runway to get started again. And it meant a great deal to her. We were able to give her the check here at City Hall and snap a great photo. So it's just wonderful when all the pieces come together like that. So looking ahead for 2023, just a couple of trends. I mentioned some of this already. A lot of demand from startup businesses, a lot of transactions happening in terms of buying and selling. Succession planning is definitely a hot topic. We have a really lovely partnership with the University of Minnesota's Law School, and they're able to put together tools and do research for us when we see trends like this happening. So we've talked to them about this, and they put together essentially an FAQ tool all about succession planning and buying a business and different things that folks should be aware of. So we have a great resource library already, but we're always looking to add more resources to that, and our partners let us do that. And this should come as no surprise, but staffing, employee retention, wages keep going up. That's certainly a theme that is popping up for us and for our business owners. It seems like certain sectors are definitely affected by that more so than others, like the service sector and the retail sector. It's just really tough right now for those businesses to keep their employees. And we've got a couple of webinars in the offing too, which is exciting. We have a TikTok for Small Business webinar coming up at the end of March. That will be March 29th. That's a virtual panel discussion. We've got 3 business owners, including a Dakota County business owner, talking about how you can leverage TikTok for your small business. And that's a great tool because it is free for them, and you can really tune into your market when you're connected with them in this new app. So looking forward to learning more about that. And we've got a small business law Q&A coming up in April as well. I believe that's April 18th. And then we're doing a bookkeeping Q&A towards the end of April or early May as well. So with that, thank you again for having me. And I am very happy to answer any questions you might have about the program or the businesses that we work with.
Commissioners, any questions?
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
So what percentage of the people that you advise get loans?
That's a great question, actually. I don't have that statistic off the top of my head. Sometimes it just takes a while. you know, especially if you're talking to someone that's just starting out. They've got to put in the work, they've got to write the business plan, they have to do the financial projections. You know, I guess we do have the numbers for last year for Burnsville. We did 1 loan and the 2 micro grants, and we worked with 26 clients. So that gives you a little bit of a gauge. But we do have a number of other loans that are in underwriting. Sometimes projects just take time and they're waiting for construction bids, or the lease falls through, or there's just different setbacks. But yeah, there's a couple of other projects in the works that I've been talking to the city about too. So hopefully more to come this year.
If you were to look back 3 to 5 years, what percentage of the clients that you've worked with are still active in their business?
Well, I've been in the role for almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in July. And, you know, I do my very best to keep tabs on, you know, almost all the businesses that will, you know, give me updates on what they're doing. And it's not often that I hear of people closing their doors. You know, they might need to pivot or do something a little bit differently, or think about a different location, things like that. But I can't say that I know of a business I've worked in Burnsville that has closed their doors since I've joined the program.
Do they come back to you regularly for help with issues that they encounter?
They do. It's, you know, sometimes I talk to folks just once, you know, and they've got questions and we get those questions answered and they move on. But other businesses, it is more of an ongoing relationship, and I check in with them. If I don't hear from them, it's like, what's going on? You know, let's have a meeting to talk about what's going on. But yeah, it can be ongoing. It's an unlimited service, really. So just to know, like you heard in the video, to know that they have someone that they can come back to if they're experiencing issues or challenges, or maybe they're, you know, growing and the business is changing and their needs are changing. Because in terms of lending, you know, we help people as they're getting started, but ultimately they will sort of graduate, you know, to bank financing or more of these traditional sources of assistance. And so connecting them, making those referrals, things like that. Maybe they couldn't go to a bank for their first loan, but the second time around, they're growing, they need a new location, there's that track record, they've got their financials they can look back on. We make that introduction, you know, to the local bank, and they can take it from there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Do you monitor their books or their financing over the months and quarters and years?
If they're a loan client, they do have to send us their financial statements. That's a term, you know, of the loan closing. But for other clients, you know, if we're actively meeting and talking about their business, yes, we ask for that, and they can choose to provide it. But it's not a requirement for just the business assistance piece of it. But the more we know, the more we can help. So it's kind of, you know, if they don't want to share it, how much can we really advise at that point?
Well, I will say that Open to Business was one of the first programs that I learned about when I started this role, which was about the same time that you started your role. And it's been my favorite resource as a professional to be able to send people your way, or to be really proud that I know that people in our community can get that support from really great resources, especially in the marketplace today. There are so many paid programs and coaching programs, and to know that we actually have really incredible opportunities that we're providing for free, and great access to the knowledge and the assistance, really customized. It's always a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Natalie, thanks for your presentation and for your partnership with Burnsville.
Thank you so much.
Now on to the next agenda item, number 4, review of 2023 sustainability programs. Beth Weber is here to introduce our presenter tonight. The item is for information and discussion purposes only. No motions or recommendations is required at this time.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight we have with us Caroline McFadden. She's our sustainability coordinator here at the city. And she has done a really great job of providing updates to other commissions, and so we felt that it was relevant to connect her with you all as well. She and I have done a lot of work since her time starting here in providing relevant information that kind of ties sustainability and economic development together. And so I think that you'll find her presentation valuable tonight.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Beth, and thank you, Commission, for having me. As Beth mentioned, my name is Caroline McFadden. I'm the city's sustainability coordinator. Some of you might know Sue Bast, who was in this role previously. Sue retired in May, and so now I am in this role. So Beth invited me here today to kind of talk about some of the programs and projects that we've been working on in 2022. So we'll go deep into some greenhouse gas inventories, and then we'll talk about some of the communication programs that Beth just mentioned, but then we'll also get into some next steps and what you might be seeing from the sustainability group going forward. But before I get into all of that, I just want to go over, as just a reminder of how sustainability is planned and implemented in the city of Burnsville. So Burnsville has a sustainability plan that was adopted in 2020, and I think some of you folks who are on this commission helped develop that plan, so thank you very much for that. So the sustainability plan is set up with 10 focus areas, which are on your screen right now. These are the different sectors that we as the city can target to reduce our environmental impacts, both within city operations and within the community as a whole. Each of these 10 different focus areas has their own goals with actions and strategies that we can use to help us achieve those goals. But everything in the sustainability plan is really driven by an overarching goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 15% by 2015, 30% by 2025, and 80% by 2050. And that's a goal that was adopted by the City Council in 2011. So to measure our progress towards the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, we complete greenhouse gas emission inventories every other year. So these are studies that look at emissions related to our energy use, our electricity and natural gas use. It looks at emissions related to our fleet and equipment, and emissions related to solid waste energy or solid waste generation and disposal. We also, that is specific to internal use or for internal operations, but then we also do annually a community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory that looks at emissions related to residents and businesses and travel within the city borders. So we'll talk about those. So this is the greenhouse gas emission inventory specific for city operations. So we completed this last summer in 2022, looking at emissions related to calendar year 2021. And we reached a 34% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in 2021. This means we achieved our goal of a 30% reduction a few years ahead of time. So our goal was to achieve that by 2025. We achieved this goal by two primary reasons. The first is using less electricity. So electricity was about 3/4 of our greenhouse gas emissions in 2021, but the good news is that we're just using less of it. So our buildings are becoming more efficient. That's through upgrades in HVAC equipment, so the heating and cooling equipment, and also upgrades to our lighting, so LED upgrades to the light bulbs. The second reason is because there's a lower utility emission factor. So this utility emission factor is a ratio that corresponds to the source of electricity for each utility company. So how each utility company generates their electricity, whether that's through coal, natural gas, or renewable sources like solar and wind, that's going to determine their utility factor. So the more renewable sources, like solar generation and wind generation, the lower the utility emission factor is going to be. So Burnsville has 3 utility companies that supply electricity to various parts of the city. Each of those utility companies has a different utility emission factor, and the utility emission factors change every year based on the source of how they're generating their electricity. But those emission factors have been going down steadily over the years, and in 2021, that was 29% lower than it was in 2005. So those are the 2 main reasons that we're seeing these huge reductions in greenhouse gas emissions.
Was the changeover of the Black Dog plant a factor in this?
Exactly. Yep. That was a huge factor in that. So the Black Dog plant that changed from coal generation or generating electricity through coal burning to natural gas, I think, was that in 2015? That's going to lower Xcel Energy's utility emission factor. So yeah, that was a huge part of it. So we are benefiting from the investments of our partners, the utility companies.
I have an additional question. With the electricity reduction, is any of that related to changes due to the COVID pandemic that were lingering in 2021 that we may see a bounce back, or is that a pretty sound reduction that we can expect to continue?
That's a great question. And we're starting to see some of those bounce backs in other areas. I think for city operations specifically, it would have a slight impact, but maybe not a lot. I think if we were looking at 2020, we'd see that pretty drastically. But in 2021, things were open, the buildings were, being illuminated. So I don't think that is a major driver of it. But save that question for when we get to the communities, because you'll see that. Any other questions on this slide? And definitely feel free to interrupt, especially these first 4 or 5 slides are pretty dense, pretty data heavy, so I can stop whenever. So then this just goes into a little more detail of where the sources of greenhouse gas emissions are by city function. So the pie chart on my left shows that potable water, so this is the treating, pumping, and supplying potable water, is the main source of greenhouse gas emissions for city functions. Which it looks like a lot, but then if you look at the graph to the right, you can see that section of it, which is the blue section, has also decreased the most over time. So that's actually a 62% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions from our water treatment plant since 2005. And that's mostly because they're using less electricity because they're now pulling water from surface water instead of always just pumping from deep wells, and they're making their operations more efficient. Another thing that I quickly just wanted to highlight is the buildings and facilities green part on the pie chart. So that's 37% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Those emissions are just heating, cooling, and lighting our city buildings. So when you look at the stacked graph on the right, it doesn't look like we've seen a big decrease in emissions from that sector over time. We actually have. It's been about 8%. But what is most important is that since 2005, we actually have more space. We have the Ames Center, we have the parking ramps in the heart of the city. So although our emissions as a whole haven't decreased as much as we would like them to, we are heating and cooling and lighting more space. So our energy consumption per square foot has gone down a lot more than is actually represented on here. And then just a few other fun facts about this. The street lights and street signals, so this is the red part, that has decreased 26% since 2005, and that's because we're transitioning to LED lights in the street lights and street signals. The street signals are 100% LED right now, and we're going through and doing that with the street lights. And we are using 14% less fuel in our fleet vehicles because we're transitioning to hybrids, and we are generating 5% less trash. So those are good findings that we like to see.
So what percentage of the streetlights have been changed? So, not streetlights, the street lighting has changed over to LED.
So I don't have an exact number. Right now, we're estimating between like 70 and 80% maybe, so we're getting close
Okay.
to being 100%. Any other questions? So this is the last slide on greenhouse gas emissions by city function, but now we'll go into the community-wide greenhouse gas emission inventory. So in 2021, we achieved a 19% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from a 2007 baseline. So when you look at the graph, this is where you can really see the impacts of COVID in 2020. So in 2021, though, we achieved our reductions primarily through using less electricity, again, both in the residential and the commercial sector. Lights are getting more efficient, and all of our devices are getting more efficient as well. We traveled 19% fewer miles, which I think that is pretty much COVID. So you can see in 2021, we're seeing the bounce back. I would expect that to continue to go up in the next few years. But similarly, the community-wide reductions are being driven by a lower utility emission factor as well. So we do this community-wide greenhouse gas emission with the Regional Indicators Initiative. So this is a partnership with, I want to say it's most, if not all, cities within the metro area, and a lot of cities outside of the metro area as well in Minnesota have a greenhouse gas emission inventory completed for their community every year. So you can find all of this information, as well as being able to compare where Burnsville is at with other like or similar cities at the Regional Indicators Initiative.
Are we doing anything to encourage businesses to take advantage? And it's the organization that we use for the home energy audits. They help commercial businesses to convert their lighting and upgrade their HVAC. Do we promote that at all to businesses in Burnsville?
We do a little bit, and I think that's something that we can definitely start to do a lot more as well as some of the other opportunities that are available through the utility companies. Yeah, I think those are going to be coming up a lot more.
Because I think that could be a big factor. The church I go to, I helped them convert their lights to LED, and they paid for it in 3 years.
Yes, exactly.
And now they're saving tons of money.
Yep.
And there was no increase. Basically, what is it, CEE? Mm-hmm. They provided the loan for that, and in case of a church, it was nonprofit. There was 0% loan,
Yep.
but the payback is not very far, even for someone who has to borrow the money. And the CEE kept the electric bill at the same level as it was, and the payback came out of the savings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there are really interesting financing structures available, but it's only, like you're saying, it's only as good as people who know about it. So that's going to go into later when we talk about communications of how we're going to try to continue to spread the word, maybe be a little more proactive about some of those opportunities that are available. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions?
So this just kind of goes into a little bit more detail of the community-wide greenhouse gas emissions, where it's coming from. Most of it in 2021 is coming from the energy sector, but But then unlike what we see when we do our internal greenhouse gas emissions, travel is has a much bigger role in emissions community-wide. And then so that's the chart on the left, and then when you look at the one on the right that looks at emissions from the energy sector and where they're coming from, whether it's commercial or residential. So commercial electricity use and natural gas use is a little over half of greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sector.
What's measured in the waste factor on the left side?
Like what are the emissions that would go into that?
Is that like more recycling or?
No, so recycling, when the Regional Indicators Initiative does their greenhouse gas emissions, recycling materials has no emissions associated with it. So this is all just disposal, either at a landfill or an incinerator. So that's what those emissions are. Any other questions on those? So this kind of goes into what we were talking about earlier as well. But we, as a city, internally, we use our greenhouse gas emissions inventories as an opportunity to really dig into our energy use and see over time how our buildings are consuming energy. We're also tracking the energy use monthly, but we don't quite dive into the data as deep. But we realize that not every business is going to take on a greenhouse gas inventory to look at their energy use. And you definitely don't need to, but benchmarking your energy use is one of the best ways that you can understand how energy is being used within a building. And there are free tools available for businesses to track their energy use over time, because reducing energy use directly relates to reducing costs. And I think we all want to do that. So you can take advantage of the Environmental Protection Agency has a free portfolio manager where you can upload your utility bills into it, so you can start to see changes over time. So you can identify if your energy use is steadily increasing or suddenly spikes. You might have a problem and you might want to look at some of your equipment. You can also put water data in there, and it's a good way that you can identify leaks real time. Another thing that I like to suggest is getting an energy audit through your utility company. Sometimes these are relatively low cost. If you work with your utility company, they'll go through your building, they'll identify energy conservation measures. They'll give you how much implementing that measure will cost. They'll tell you how much energy you'll save, and how much money you will save annually, so you can calculate that return on investment that you were talking about earlier, so you can prioritize your implementation of these energy conservation measures. So those are available through your utility company. And then if you want to reduce emissions related to solid waste, you can join Dakota County's business recycling program. They have grants, I think it's about $10,000 for each property, for new bins and enhancing your recycling programs, and they also provide free bin labels. So
that's really another process that I've seen work well for organizations.
Yep. Any questions on any of these? All right, so communications. So this is huge. I mean, we just went through a lot of data, and that was just related to greenhouse gas emissions. And we just went through a lot of resources that are available to folks that we want people to know about. So we're trying to figure out how we can, better connect people with the programs that are available to them. So we recently developed a sustainability hub, and this is something that I'm super excited about because it actually just launched on Friday. So y'all are some of the first people to see this. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna pull it up and we can play around in it a little bit. Just really briefly. So this is what I'm calling a one-stop shop for everything related to sustainability within the city of Burnsville. This has each of the focus areas, which I hope looks familiar to you from a few slides ago. You can go into each focus area. They're all formatted the same. A dashboard will pull up with our progress towards the goals in the sustainability plan. Each of these metrics, if there's historical data available, you can look at that so you can see trends over time. And then there's an info tab where you can kind of get an idea of what the data mean. Each section has the goals. These are directly taken from the sustainability plan, so we're being consistent with the plan. A little bit of background information about why we feel like this focus area is important. Some information about what Burnsville is doing. And one thing that we would love to do in the future going forward is start to populate this with not just what the city itself is doing, but with what folks in the community are doing. So if you know of businesses that are actively involved in reducing their energy use or conserving water, we would love to know that so we can highlight it here. And then there's a section in each focus area of how you can make a difference. Admittedly, most of these calls to action are more focused towards residents. But if you go up top, there's this resources tab that brings you back to the sustainability website, Burnsville sustainability website. And towards the bottom, there's some information about where you can get technical assistance and some of the financing as well. So I just wanted to kind of do a brief intro of the Sustainability Hub so you can see that it exists, some of the information that might be available to folks on it, and just so you can see that we have a lot of goals in the sustainability plan, and we are using them and actually tracking our progress towards those goals, and we're trying to do that in a transparent way.
What's next for the Sustainability Hub as far as like communicating that out? Are you going to have, booths at upcoming community events? Do you have swag directing people to the Sustainability Hub to let them know it exists now? What's next for the visibility of that?
We hadn't considered swag, but thank you for the idea because we will now look into that. So we started sending it to our networks as like a soft launch on Friday. It's going to be out in some social media blasts, hopefully this week or next week to kind of spread the word. We're going to include it in the next Burnsville in Brief and the Burnsville Bulletin so people know about it.
Don't forget the Chamber of Commerce, their weekly
Yes.
newsletters.
Okay.
The other thing is make sure you get some good examples, both for residential and commercial, of how it's changed. I noticed there was one example of a payback of 6 years in here, but get more of those because people respond to things like that.
Exactly. And I think, a lot of the costs are coming down. So yes, we should definitely be mindful of that. And it is dynamic, so we're looking at updating the dashboards every year as we get new data on our progress towards our goals. Another thing, like Beth mentioned, she has been very gracious in the Opportunity Belongs Here newsletter to provide sustainability some space. And so maybe this is another good method that we can start trying to communicate some of the good ideas that you all have talked about today. So far since I've been here, we've been trying to promote a lot of the grant opportunities that are relevant to businesses. We've been trying to highlight businesses who are doing good things in the sustainability world that we know of, but we know there's a lot of people out there who are doing a lot of really good stuff. We just don't know it. So if you have those stories as well, feel free to share them with Beth or Regina or myself. We would love to include that either in Opportunity Belongs Here or in the Sustainability Hub.
One thought is it seems like a really strong opportunity for partnering with the school, especially with their pathways programs. There would be a lot in sustainability technology that then you get that word out to the students. They also get to highlight it to their parents. Their parents own houses in Burnsville. Their
Yeah.
parents work or own businesses in Burnsville, so it spreads some visibility there too.
Yes, that is a great idea. I apologize. Maybe I shouldn't be taking notes, but I'm also taking notes as I'm up here.
The other thing, you could probably get from CEE some examples of savings for both residential and businesses.
Yep. Yes. Yep. We'll connect with CEE, and CEE is going to be mentioned a little bit later as well. They are a great partner. Yeah. So, any other questions or great ideas that I can jot down? All right, so now we'll get into some of the, for me, really exciting next steps. But I'll just say some of these projects are at the very early stages. So we're either just kicking them off or they're about to kick off. So one of them is a Partners in Energy program. So this is a 2-year no-cost program with Excel Energy. They will provide us with a facilitator, actually from CEE, who will help us develop an energy action plan that is specific to Burnsville's energy use reduction goals. So we're going to use the goals in the sustainability plan. And we think that having this tailored approach is really going to help us as a city identify and implement the most effective energy saving techniques for our community. So through this partnership, Excel Energy and CEE are going to help us develop this plan, but also they're going to help us implement it. So they're going to give us support with outreach, with plan development, and it's all free. So I don't have a ton of information about it because technically we kick this program off at the end of the month, but I did want to give a little teaser right now with you all, because as part of the development of this energy plan, we're going to be doing a lot of stakeholder engagement and reaching out to business leaders and residents and other folks in the community so that we make sure that we're developing a plan that's going to be successful in Burnsville. So I just wanted to put it out here in case you hear a little bit more about the Partners in Energy program in the future. Another thing that we are looking at right now are electric vehicles. And I know that I'm in like a very small sustainability bubble, but I feel like I can finally say very confidently that electric vehicles are becoming very popular, and their popularity is rapidly increasing, especially I think over the next few years, we're gonna see a lot more of them. And a lot of it is actually driven by the private sector, which we don't say very often. So I'm sure you're all aware, GM is, by 2025, they're gonna have 20 models that are electric only, and they're gonna transition all of their new models to electric by 2035.
I agree with that trend. Anecdotal evidence being at the school pickup and drop-off line, you see a lot more electric vehicles now.
Yes, yeah, Tesla really brought them mainstream.
Yep.
And that the drop-off line is a great place for them with all of the idling. So we want to make sure that as a city, we're ready for this change. So we were lucky enough to be recently selected to be part of the EV Smart Communities program. This is another free program offered through the Great Plains Institute, where for over 18 months, they're going to give us technical assistance and resources of how helping us increase our electric vehicle readiness as a city. And that's going to look different for all of the cities who are part of the program, whether that's helping us with increasing electric vehicle charging infrastructure, just increasing like ride and drive events so people become familiar with driving electric vehicles, or even like working through our planning process to make sure there aren't any barriers of installing charging infrastructure.
Well, and maybe putting some road signs up that say exit here to charge your electric car.
Yeah,
That would bring people into Burnsville too.
yes. And the charging infrastructure is going to change. A lot is happening at the state level. A lot is happening at the federal level of trying to increase electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And I know MnDOT is working on it a lot. And I've been on some calls with them, but I don't think anybody's mentioned that street sign idea. And I'm going to bring that up to them because I think that's you need to know which exit to get off at. So that's a great idea.
Who is going to be paying for the electricity for these charging stations
So
initially?
so it all depends. It depends on the owner of the charging station and how they set it up. Most of the time, there's a fee to use the charging station. So the fee is per kilowatt hour that your car uses. So a lot of times that's enough. The owner of the charging station will set a fee that is more than they're paying for electricity. So it's the car owner usually.
Do we have estimates as to what people are paying to charge a vehicle?
So,
A low or dead battery?
so actually like 80% of electric vehicle charging happens at home. So most people are just using it at home. But when you're on the go, so the city used to own 3 charging stations in the heart of the city ramps and one of the surface lots. I think the city was charging 10 cents per kilowatt hour. We recently, and just for context, I think at those locations, we were paying maybe 6 cents per kilowatt hour, 6 to 8 cents. It varies over time. But we recently transferred ownership of those stations, and the new owner is charging 35 cents per kilowatt hour. And they're charging a fee if your vehicle stays there and is plugged in, but is fully charged. So it's like a space occupying fee. So I think 10 cents per kilowatt hour is more on the lower end, and I think this 35 cents is probably on the higher end.
Do you know how many kilowatt hours it takes to charge a car?
Gosh, I don't. I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to compare it to like paying for gas. for
Yeah,
example.
okay. So I have an electric vehicle. It has a very small battery, so the range is not high. I would probably pay $6 in electricity to charge it from 0 to 100. At the old charging stations.
And just one last question on that.
Yeah.
How long does it take to normally charge a battery that's low?
I-
'Cause I've heard like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Is that
Yeah.
about right?
Yeah, so I always hate being the person that's like, oh, it depends, but it does depend. So it depends on how big your battery is. But let's say most batteries right now have a range of like 250 miles. And then it depends on what charging station you're at. So if you're at a level 2 charger, that's probably going to be between like 6 and 8 hours to charge it from 0 to 80%. If you're at a fast charger, that's going to be more like 30 to 40 minutes. But again, it all depends. All of the different electric vehicles their batteries have a different capacity of what charge they can accept, like the incoming voltage. So it's going to throttle it based on that.
Like in the city of Burnsville, of course, we're building a lot of apartment buildings. I don't know if they're planning to be outfitted or with charging stations so they can charge at home. Otherwise, you're going to have long lines if it's 40 minutes of charge.
I never thought of that problem.
Yeah.
I am just living in my single-family dwelling privilege.
Well, if they start having decreased occupancy, it might be one of the ways to draw people in is having charging stations.
That's true. Let the market work it out.
But that is a big problem in the EV charging world, is the multifamily units where people don't have control over their property to be able to install one of these charging stations. So that's why there's, and in a lot of communities, there's a big push to install electric vehicle charging stations at city property that's located nearby some of the multifamily units, or finding ways to incentivize the property owners to install them.
We could put them right by our Grow Burnsville stuff so they can come and pick some fruits off the trees and charge their vehicle and head on home.
Yeah, and so that's the next bullet is we are trying to figure out ways that we can increase the amount of electric vehicle charging stations within the city. So right now we're looking at pretty much two different ways. We're looking at how we can get grant funding to cover this. So the Fire Station 1 actually just applied to the most recent Minnesota Pollution Control Agency grant for level 2 charging stations so that they can put a charger in their parking lot. And then we're also looking at different third-party ownership models as well.
Just thinking back on the apartments, if you had a 200-unit apartment building, and I would imagine you'd have to build, like bringing that kind of electricity in for 200 charging stations.
Pretty
What
expensive.
is the, what produces that electricity? Is that coal or natural gas? We were talking about that earlier at Black Dog.
Yeah. So, it is whatever the utility company, whatever their grid supply is. So most of the grids are becoming greener. So a lot of the electricity going to the grid is being provided by renewable sources, but not all of it. So then, yes, it would be natural gas or coal.
How does that impact our sustainability goals? If we take this 10, 20, 30 years down the road and we've got apartment buildings with charging stations, I know the technology will improve and help that out, but you would think that you would create a lot of emissions by providing those resources?
Yeah, so it's funny because I was trying to find ways. This is a really good conversation to have, and it's very tricky because you're right. As this whole time I was saying, like, most of our greenhouse gas emissions were from electricity use. And now I'm talking about, like, electrifying vehicles. And there's a whole other subset, which you'll hear about as well, not in this presentation, but in the next few years, people are going to talk about electrifying buildings a lot more. So getting rid of natural gas boilers and replacing them with things like air source heat pumps, which are powered by electricity. And so it's the same question of, like, if that's a huge source of our emissions, why are we transitioning everything to it? There's two reasons. One of the main reasons is that our electricity grid is one of the ways that we can easily switch to supplying that by renewable power. So if our utility companies invest in carbon-free electricity, which now, as of a few weeks ago, in Minnesota, they're required to do that by 2040 based on action taken, at the state level. So by 2040, our utility companies are going to need to be supplying 100% renewable energy to the grid. So then it wouldn't impact the greenhouse gas emissions at all. And then you're getting rid of the burning of fossil fuels for gasoline in the car.
Renewable being solar, wind?
Yep, solar, wind. I think they're talking about hydro. There are some discussions of nuclear, because there's some nuclear plants in Minnesota. So, yeah. They're calling it carbon-free, which is how then the nuclear gets in there.
Has the city looked at putting solar panels on its buildings?
Before I started, there was a solar report that looked at some of the roofs and the angle that they're at, and to determine whether or not they were optimal for solar. But that is one of the things that, we are, like, very interested in doing and looking at.
I mean, you'd think like the Ames Center doesn't have too many trees or anything covering it, so it probably could put some panels on there.
Yeah, and that the tricky part, and I don't know if the report went into it is you have to have a roof that is structurally sound to support the panels. So it depends. The Ames Center is like fairly new, so there's a chance that it was built with a strong enough roof, but we're not sure. But it is one of the things that, oh, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. I think that they're looking at that when they're evaluating the new buildings to make sure that the roofs are what we call solar ready, so that they are, can structurally support the panels.
They're getting lighter too.
They are, and they're getting so much more efficient. So yeah, now's the time. This is great discussion. And so I don't want to cut it short by moving on, but. So this kind of follows up with the conversations we've been having. So as a city, we're looking at how we can leverage grant funds to be able to pay for some of this, like really exciting stuff that we're talking about. And I feel like this is just a really great time to be doing sustainability work, because this is there's going to be a lot of grant funding available, specifically to municipalities, but we're still seeing how that's going to shake out for the commercial sector as well. So the federal government in the last few years passed the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. I call it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act in 2021 and the Inflation Reduction Act that was just passed in the summer of 2022. Both of those bills have a lot of funding specifically for transitioning buildings from natural gas boilers to electric sources of heating and cooling. A lot of grant funding for solar on municipal buildings, things like that. So in the next few years, we're definitely going to be keeping our eye on and acting on any of the federal and state grants that will help us pay for some of these actions. And while we do that, anything that comes along that is like applicable to businesses in Burnsville, we will definitely share with you. Thinking in the Opportunity Belongs Here newsletter, but if there are other methods that are appropriate, we'll do that as well.
I think Beth and or Regina know how to get the list from the state of all the businesses in Burnsville.
Yeah, so there'll be good resources. So that is actually, that's it.
So I have a minor question that probably relates to this, but the compost drop-off that Dakota County has here, how much is that used?
Oh my gosh. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know where we can look. And it is the Sustainability Hub.
Oh,
wow. So if you go to focus areas, solid waste, we actually are tracking that. So every year there's over 200,000 pounds of organics diverted from that drop site. And at the end of 2021, there were over 600 Burnsville residents who are participating in the program. Yep. So
if you got that many good things happening, can't you convince Dakota County to, on this side of the county, to put a recycling zone location versus having to travel all the way over to
Dodd Road.
Yeah.
Has this group talked about it? I think Dakota County is planning on, they're opening a second recycling zone. And they were looking at locating it closer to Burnsville. My gosh.
If you show them this participation, I'd say that there'd be a good usage of it.
Yeah, yep. Their goal is to have it be kind of in the Burnsville, Lakeville area. The last time I talked to them about it, so.
I could just add additional information. I know that they were looking. I don't know if they've located a site, but one of the challenges is having enough land available and accessibility. And so I know in Burnsville, a lot of land that was available is pretty challenging. And I'm not sure where they are in their process right now, but they were definitely looking in Burnsville. They may still be, but I'm not
You own
sure.
a piece of land right over there on 5 and 13 that you could,
It's
easily
not big enough
accessible.
for them.
Yeah?
We
It's
do.
probably big enough.
It's not according to their,
Oh,
their needs.
okay. Very good. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Any other questions come up, you can find me easily.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is an Economic Development Strategic Plan update. Beth Weber is here to provide the presentation of the item and an overview of the background report. The item is for information and discussion purposes only, and no motion or recommendation is required at this time. Beth?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. You've had a lot of information tonight, so I will be concise with my presentation. We've heard a lot of great things. But related to our strategic plan goals, we are still working towards our existing goals this year, which includes ensuring the sustainability of the Burnsville Shopping Center and County Road 42 corridor. So recently approved by City Council was Trove Brewing, and then the Ensign Market expansion to the Burnsville Center. And then Luther Hyundai was also approved for demolition to their existing building and then construction of a new larger building. So you can kind of see a rendering of that. Jamba Juice and Auntie Annie's drive-through is proposed to be on the corner of County Road 42 and Newton. So that would be across the street from the Caribou Coffee Hut, just north of our new Fire Station 1. So that is currently under review. And then we recently attended the Foss Swim School ribbon cutting. And they are located in the Cobblestone Court Shopping Center in the former Old Country Buffet location. Continuing sharing messaging for the school district in the city. We were excited to hear that the Burnsville School Resource Officers honored a teacher named Dave Palmer for kind of going above and beyond and helping a student that was having a seizure during class. So he is a former employee of the Minneapolis Police Department, and so he likely used some of that training to help keep that student safe and comfortable until they could be helped. And then we are continuing with our partners meetings, as we call them. So we meet regularly with the school district, the chamber, and the Convention and Visitors Bureau to just make sure we're all updated on each other's projects and how we can best support each other. Development continues within Heart of the City. So you may have heard staff is working very hard on obtaining the remaining funding that we'll need for mobility improvements to Highway 13 and Nicollet Avenue. So the estimated cost of that project is about $45 million. And through a couple different funding sources, I believe we're at about $13 million that we have obtained thus far. But that project is proposed to have a grade separation change to make it safer for pedestrians. And there's kind of a rendering that you can see there. That photo or rendering is also available on our website to be a more viewer-friendly size at a later date. And then MWF Properties has applied for a plat to prepare for future multifamily development. That's adjacent to their current land that they have in Heart of the City on the former Krause Anderson property. And their current projects include a 135-unit senior affordable building and a 162-unit market rate building. So this property is kind of to the south and east. I kind of outlined it in red, and then they own the rest of the green on that photo. And then we're continuing to enhance and build awareness around the city's existing housing and commercial programs. So you've heard a couple times tonight about the Center for Energy and Environment, CEE. Thus far, for our residents, 12 rebates have been provided and 74 home energy visits to people's residences have occurred. And then you're also very familiar with our homework program. So our senior deferred loan, the available funds for 2023 have been exhausted. So we're certainly glad that that is being utilized. But we do still have funds available in our regular home improvement loan, and then also code cash available for those folks that have code enforcement actions and maybe need some additional assistance correcting those, so they can get those taken care of at their homes. And then continuing the city's position as a regional destination, the annual chamber luncheon occurred not too long ago and was attended by staff, elected officials, and several commissioners. And so it was great to kind of network with everybody at that luncheon. We were able to hear a presentation on the Grow Minnesota program and kind of how that's been impactful for Burnsville. That's a program that the city and the Burnsville Chamber participate in, which is contracted for those 24 business visits. And then that information is confidentially put into the Grow Minnesota system so that we receive a report back. And then we've also had a lot of events. So at Polar Fest not too long ago, we had a placemaking kind of component there, which was an ice sculpture picture frame. So you'll kind of see a photo of that. That was something that Regina had worked closely on with our Parks and Rec folks. And then we have a consultant that kind of helped guide us in that direction. And it was very popular, and there was lines to have your picture taken. And so people were really excited by that opportunity. And then in January and February, we were so excited to have some ribbon cuttings. We celebrated with Sabrina's Bridal, located inside the Burnsville Center. You'll see a photo of that on your screen. And then San Miguel Panaderia, King and Companies, and the Flower Pot were also on the list of celebrations. So we're always happy when we can celebrate with a new business or an existing business with any milestones that they might have. And so we always look forward to sharing that with you all as well. And then just to wrap up my portion of things, just a reminder to check out our development map. It is being continually updated with all of our new projects. We've had a lot of great feedback on the new format of it with its filter functions and the search functions. We're able to provide additional photos that our old map didn't allow us to do. And then make sure that you're subscribed to the Opportunity Belongs Here newsletter. We push out a lot of great information, and just kind of a proud note, we've grown it by over 270 subscribers since 2022. And then our next regularly scheduled meeting will be May 10th, and then kind of depending on how things go with the Economic Development Strategic Plan update, we'll certainly communicate any changes to that schedule to you all.
Okay, any questions for Beth?
Just a quick question on that Highway 13 Nicollet. Are we looking to do an overpass over 13?
Yep, a pedestrian over.
Just a pedestrian? Okay.
Weren't they going to separate the grade too?
Yes. Yep, so I can go back to that. It's unfortunately small, but you kind of see the orange in the middle. That would be the pedestrian overpass, and then the whole exchange near the bus station on Nicollet would have a roundabout, and just the whole access would change. So there's better information on our website. I'm certainly not the most qualified person to talk about it, but it's something that I wanted to bring to your attention just as it occurs within heart of the city. So
I saw a lot of great presence around transportation projects like this and others just getting some great feedback from the community at Polar Fest, and I've seen a lot of visibility, so I feel like you've been getting a lot of opportunities for stakeholder feedback, so that's been impressive.
Thank you. Yes, our engineering department has put a lot of time and effort into more engagement. I think they mentioned at a city council meeting that they do neighborhood meetings when it relates to residential construction, so folks can know when it's coming, and so the feedback from that has been very positive, and certainly something that staff was likely to continue.
Well, is there any need to move for an ending of the meeting, or since
No,
it's not
we-
an
we got-
official meeting with official
No,
votes?
we got one more
Oh, we've got
agenda.
one more thing. Oh my goodness.
Uh,
Yeah, I'll
We're gonna have
kick
a
it off. And then we'll see
development
what's next.
strategic plan update discussion led by Regina Dean.
Oh.
All yours, Regina.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So, Economic Development Strategic Plan Update Discussion. This is kind of a first intro kickoff, I would say, into what will eventually be our full-on update. And we wanted to have an opportunity just to check in with you as we start to kick things off to hear your thoughts about what's gone well, what we might want to change, and what we see for the future. So we don't have to get it all out now. We certainly have some commission members that are missing tonight. They may have additional input, and we can, as time goes on, gather more information as we kick off this process. So this is just a baby steps into it. And just as a little bit of history, in 2018, the Economic Development Authority approved our first Economic Development Strategic Plan. And that was after about 10, 11 months of conversations with the Economic Development Commission, the City Council, who is also the EDA, or Economic Development Authority, and some engagement with, it sounds like, I'm looking back in history, I wasn't part of the process, but looking back in history, it looks like the Chamber of Commerce and the Experience Burnsville, or the Convention Bureau, also had some sort of engagement and interaction, and actually offered memos of support for adopting an economic development strategic plan for the city. After a series of meetings and interactions primarily with just the Economic Development Commission and EDA, or council, the staff at that time and the council and commission established 5 goals. And this was after what sounded like, again, reading back into history, one-on-one conversations with each council or commission member between the consultant and the various bodies, and hearing what they thought were important issues or things to consider within this plan. There were a series of workshops that occurred, and taking that information that the consultant heard through these conversations, and these themes arose where it was voted on by a dot exercise on what should be a priority. And there were a list of like 10, 11, 12 items, different themes. And what arose as top items through this dot exercise were the 5 goals that are established that you just heard Beth talk about, and things that we've been working towards as a staff over the last 4.5 years. These 5 goals really guide the work that we do in economic development, and really have set our priority and our focus. And we've had implementation and action items that we've worked towards. And now it's time for a refresh. So again, you're very familiar with the top 5 goals that we had been working on, but we want to know, what we should be doing in the future. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about what's working well with the plan, and maybe what should be removed or changed or re-examined, what's missing, and then any input on how the plan should be developed in the future. Again, the prior plan didn't have a lot of community engagement. It was pretty focused on kind of the commissions and council. And so it just in general, we'd like to hear your thoughts. And we can go share maybe one by one, and I can certainly fill in any context that I have, Beth as well, and Jeff Thompson is also here as a resource as well.
Commissioner Sislo, do you want to start?
I'd be curious about the image that the school district has. I'm not completely aware of what the image is. It sounds like since we're asking about it, it must not be 100% favorable. So what's going on with the school district?
I can talk about just briefly. So that did come up as obviously a top 5 item. I know through my conversations with staff at the school district, they've had concerns about that particular strategic plan item, and the comments were concerns about, they thought that this was a problem that, we were trying to solve for them, and kind of impose that on them rather than kind of working together in a partnership fashion or other fashion. The comments that I've read in the Economic Development Strategic Plan for the people that were interviewed at the time, the commission members and council that gave feedback, was they were concerned about the negative perceptions that they had heard, the concern that the decline in property tax values if people are leaving Burnsville, and again at the time, leaving Burnsville, selling their houses, wanting to move out of the school district. And so those were some of the items that were voiced at the time. 5 years has gone on. We've heard over the years, just from my experience with the school district, we've, as a staff to staff, I think we've formed stronger relationships with them. We've learned at the Economic Development Commission about the Pathways program that they have and all the great work that they're doing to kind of grow students within the school district and the attention that they're putting on that. And the school district also came with their marketing plan and what they're doing to try to attract and retain students within the system. So
I will just add, from a concrete place, because there are a lot of opinion places and a lot of rumors or thoughts or whatever, but from a concrete place, it was a reaction to a trend of open enrolling out of the district, so residents declining enrollment within the district because they were open enrolling out to neighboring districts. And that resulted then in closing 20% of the elementary schools and 30% of the middle school in the school district that includes Burnsville. So those are sort of the factors that were leading up to why that would be important, and happened in the very middle of this time frame too that we're looking at from the point where we put it on the plan to today. Those are fact-based, very specific things.
Well, and I think I have an example of a young couple who bought in the neighborhood that I live in, and they said, well, we bought in Burnsville because it was $10,000 less than the same house in other communities around Burnsville. And if we have kids and, we want to send them to school, we can always, sell the house and move to another city. That was their impression of the school district. So they've had a child and they're not moving, so
Yeah.
it might have changed.
Well, the school board sets the agenda for the schools, and does the city have a program where they work with the school board or try to kind of?
Well, I don't know that we need a strategic plan item for that at this point in time anymore, because you are regularly meeting with them, and it can be a part of your regular routine now, rather than focus and look at some other areas. Like, one of the things I was looking, the heart of the city, develop that. Well, that's going to be almost all developed but there's also a lot of area that could use redevelopment. It's close to the heart of the city and could be considered part of the heart of the city, so that might be how we change the goal. And there's a lot of redevelopment within Burnsville that's gonna have to happen. So I think we have, you know, a lot of challenge in that area, and that would be more of a focus for the commission than maybe the school district anymore.
I do think that the school district and great relationships with the school district and open communication and strong like knowledge of what's going on there is a really big economic development issue. And that's because if it were in the position that it had been and has been the trend, it does mean that more of our residents are living their life in a different direction than in Burnsville. And that means anecdotally, if you're going to drop your kids off at an Egan school because that's where you've decided to open enroll because you're not satisfied with the school district and the reputation, then you also hit the target and you pick up your dry cleaning and you do all of your spending over there because that's where you're doing your activity. So your economic activity happens there as well. So it's a little short-sighted when we think, oh, a school district, the school board gets to make their decisions. That's true, but their decisions have huge economic impacts across the community. And so making sure we have a strong communication relationship with them is a really great economic priority to me. They're all interconnected.
And I would guess the other piece that I look at is, you know, it shouldn't just be the commission members and the council. In fact, it should be the opposite of that almost. I mean, you should, like I just said about Heart of the City and some of the older buildings that are near there, you know, those property owners, if we're looking at redevelopment in Burnsville, what's their feedback? Are they interested in redeveloping their property? You know? That type of thing. So we really need to know what their feedback is.
On a related note, very similar to that, I would say, and I'm not sure what the status of these sorts of relationships are, but a priority to me is a seamless or a positive transition between area cities. So when we're looking at what's going on, I mean, this just came up with communications I had with friends and neighbors last night. They were talking about all the talk around what's happening at Metcalf, and they said, well, the Burnsville City Council will decide. And I said, no, the Burnsville City Council will not decide beans about that because Burnsville doesn't have the property. It's not theirs. They make no decisions about that, but it has a huge impact on Burnsville. So you have to have great communications and opportunities to interact about that too, because whatever happens there, you know, 100 feet away is Burnsville, and that's where we do have some opportunities to help shape that experience, and our choices have to be shaped by their significant choice. So that, I would say, a priority to the fringes of the city and the experience of entering the city would be a priority that I'd like to be considered, as opposed to, you know, we've cited the two really specific in the core of the city economic corridors, but we've got a lot going on as you enter the city that's maybe ready for some attention.
Well, and that's why we have to get feedback from them, because I know Regina in particular has tried to work with that property owner next to the Metcalf site, and he just doesn't seem to want to cooperate at all.
Yep.
So,
There's a new property owner now.
did somebody?
Sorry.
Did somebody buy it?
We were informed that a new owner has purchased the property. So maybe there's hope for the future.
Maybe. I think that it's a, because you can't do anything to control somebody's private property.
Eminent domain.
Yeah, well, but you have to have specific guidance on that. You can't just do that because you don't like what they're doing. You have to have like specific reasons. But what I will say is helpful that the city can control is engaging activities. So more activities over the winter at North River Hills Park means that you're engaging the neighborhood there and bringing them into the things that you've got going on. And when you're living on the fringe of a city like that, it does help to be sort of pulled in and reminded of what's going on throughout your city. So keeping an eye to opportunities to have things not just in the heart, but utilizing all of the fringes to keep those communities the most engaged, those businesses, those economic corridors engaged as well.
Are there any segments of the population that you see that maybe weren't highlighted in our current economic development strategic plan? It was very focused on, like you said, these kind of core areas of, as far as geography, this what we call the center village and heart of the city, and just in very general, a regional destination is called out, and very general, let's focus on business programs and residential programs, and anything that,
I read somewhere, I thought Dan Keeley had talked about putting out a futsal arena, or futsal arenas, like smaller soccer balls. We have a large growing Hispanic community and Somali community, and they like to play soccer, and I think having a futsal arena would be ideal for that population. I think it would be exciting for them. I don't know how we'd run it, but we have the Civic Center, the hockey arena, and the garage, something like that where kids could come and play and stuff like that.
Well, and
maybe it would be a commercial venture instead of a city venture.
Truly, they have the corner, what is it, Soccer Blast?
Yeah.
what that leads to is in the changes that we've seen in the world since 2018 when these 5 priorities were established, diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a much more obvious priority. We've realized how essential that is. So I would say, it has a role of consideration on those priorities, and that would help us keep that lens to any of the decisions that we make. I think that the city does a good job of trying to keep that lens overall, but to state it in your priorities like that helps you keep remembering to use it as a factor for decision making every time.
Well, and the demographics of Burnsville has changed. Maybe it started longer than 5 years ago, but in the last 5 years it has changed dramatically. And the consideration for what those people are interested in, like Ed was saying, a small soccer, venue or something like that, is important to have input on, even to showcase to private businesses that, hey, this is something that you should, put up in Burnsville because it would be appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
What I think, one of the things that's interesting, I think they call them Parkview Estates now, has their license suspended, is that they did a remodeling of the outside to make it look nice from the outside, but did nothing on the inside. And to me, it could come up so fast. No one was thinking that 2 years ago that there was problems there, but there's, all of a sudden significant problems. Mm-hmm. And how do we identify that and before it gets so significant?
One of the things that we will also be working on, and maybe this kind of plays into some of that, Chair, is a housing inventory, and how that might maybe inform some of this work as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add pickleball courts to my list too.
Ah.
A lot of people like to play that. We've got a lot of maybe abandoned tennis courts. We could convert a few of them possibly.
That does seem to be the latest sport.
At least you have space
Other
for
stuff.
courts, and they're small, the pickleball courts are smaller, so you can put more in them. But don't put them too close to people's houses, because it's such a noisy sport. Apple Valley actually closed some of theirs down.
Did they?
It was in a park that was right next to a bunch of houses, and the people were, into the night,
And the balls.
hearing the balls going back and forth.
Are there any, as we think about engaging, others, not only the commission or the council, we've got our kind of standard community partners that we've talked about, the Chamber of Commerce and Experience Burnsville, but are there any other community organizations that come to mind that you may want, us to bring to the table, that you know of or you've considered, and maybe that's something that you have to put more thought into, but just wondered if something came to mind.
One of the things we have to think about is what our infrastructure is in Burnsville, and, electricity, internet, all kinds of things like that. Do we have an infrastructure that supports what we're looking to do? And I think maybe inviting the people that, hold parts of our infrastructure in their control, have them participate in this too, and what are they doing to update that infrastructure? Do we need more, if we're gonna do a lot of electric car charging throughout the city, do we need a bigger electric, pipeline? Things like that, to understand what policies might be valuable in economic development.
Is there anything that you want to know more about to prepare you as you start to engage in the work with the Economic Development Strategic Plan? I know a number of commission members participated in a Urban Land Institute exercise, really hands-on and with a real kind of life situation to see kind of the push and pull of developers' wants and the community's wants and how that really plays out on a tabletop exercise. Are there any other types of training or education or experiences that you would see valuable to prepare you to be better equipped to provide feedback as we go along the way?
I always look at certain areas of the city, like I'm on Nicollet and Burnsville Parkway, so if you go west down the parkway from Nicollet, on the south side, there's a stretch of land there, or not land, but there's some buildings that they just look like they're older and a little run down, one story. It would be nice to just picture that as, mixed use or apartments or whatever we would want to do there, but I don't know what's involved in, dealing with the property owners. It's probably cumbersome. You see what's going on at the Burnsville Center, but just wondering about those areas of the city where the properties are a little run down. Are there people that go over there and talk to them and see if they're interested in selling? Is that something that is viable to improve the properties there, maybe upgrade them?
And, you're talking about a housing inventory, maybe even a business building inventory of, what condition are all these buildings in? What if, assuming that the current owners would be interested in upgrading them, if they need upgrading, what does the owner need to be able to do that?
Like a subsidy of sorts?
I'm not necessarily thinking subsidy, but, maybe we could pull together, I know there's lots of grants. One of the things that you pointed out on that property that's right on 13 coming in from Burnsville is that the gas station has to be abandoned there, and there are grants to do that, but just having a resource, giving it the resources, and a lot of times these people who own these older buildings aren't going out looking for what the resources are, so how do we get to them?
Well, maybe we do a target of, or make a list of the properties or the areas that are slightly dilapidated, if you will, and approach them and see what their interests are, if they're looking to sell or redevelop, or if they'd be interested in a grant funding.
I think one of the interesting things is that the senior grant program that is, as part of the homeworks, is sold out already, probably in February or January. And so there's got to be a big need there that we're not able to help with.
Can we move funds from one to the other, like code cash to whatever it's
I think
called?
that would be a conversation we'd want to have at the policy level.
Yeah.
But there's certainly, just to answer that question, there is certainly there have been more applications for the senior program than there have been for the all-age home improvement loan program. And the CEE has had to turn people away or find other resources for them. I shouldn't say turn away. They have other resources that they can point people to. So they've been a great source for connecting to other loan programs as well.
I was looking at your presentation earlier today, and what was it? St. Louis Park and Bloomington had a higher per capita, was it tax base, market value? Somehow they look like they were building up their city differently, or they're older cities, so they've had time to do that. But did you have any thoughts on, like, what are they doing to have a higher per capita market cap?
Yeah, so I think what you're referencing is that actual economic development strategic plan and some of the data that was provided within that original plan. I just know, and I don't know it detailed from front to back, but in general, there are other cities that have put more money into their economic development authority or their EDA funds through the years, or their HRA funds, and so they do have more money to work with. The great thing is our city council has made that a priority that through the last budget cycle to start to build our funds for the EDA gradually, but in time, we'll have more to work with and be able to put more money towards, I don't know what that is exactly. We'll have to, that may be part of this strategic plan and providing some direction. And we do have some information about what other cities are doing in addition to the research that was done back in 2018, more current research that we did provide to our council recently, that we can provide just examples of different programs that St. Louis Park does, and Brooklyn Park, and some of the kind of model cities in the metro.
And see what the results were of those, because I know St. Louis Park has that West End development, and there's lots of businesses in there, and they built that up from probably single story, more business buildings, stuff like that, that can make a big difference. And what spurred that development to happen? I think the other realistic thing we have to look at is Burnsville's a little further out than some of the other cities that have been able to take advantage of redeveloping, because they're able to attract people to live there or to work there or have a business there. But we seem to have a little problem sometimes keeping, particularly the smaller businesses, look at the heart of the city, commercial space. I mean, there's not too many filled. The whole, the first development that happened, they have some of the bigger spaces filled with tenants, but there's a lot of smaller spaces that were, commercial spaces that just sit empty or are storage. So we've got to figure out those types of things, and, what's the best way to develop, there's something to make it work. In fact, I think that little area that you outlined in red with MWF properties is in fact office condominiums that they probably want to move out of there and build housing in there, but that was a failed concept. They had the whole area platted for all these office condominiums, and I think there's 8 of them.
Eight or
Eight
10,
Yes.
something like that, yeah.
Not a lot.
Is
So-
the Burnsville High School, which is the old Diamond Head Mall, is that still viable, or are they ever planning on moving that campus back to the regular high school? Where that area could be redeveloped?
I haven't heard of them moving. There has been conversation about, and even in our comprehensive plans, our 2040 comprehensive plan shows opportunity for additional development on site in the parking field area. So I think there's opportunity there.
Well, they don't really
something
have any
different.
classes there anymore. The
Yeah,
senior.
that'd be a good area to look at
Well,
redeveloping. If
they've got, they've filled the space. What they did was sold their administrative building on the other side of 13 and moved all of that over here when they moved the high school. So they're utilizing the space.
Yeah, they have some of their continuing educations out of their early education, administrative offices are located there. But there may be opportunity
Yeah, they're
for
not
additional development on site.
producing revenue there as far as the tax base.
Yeah, they don't use very many of the parking spots. Probably get used more for the farmer's market than,
Just thinking, because that space is right in between, the orange line on Burnsville Parkway and then the 13 Nicollet bus stop there. So that would be ideal to bring in residential and retail and anything there, just that whole stretch there. Rather than having a school administrative offices. But just a thought.
so have you heard how the orange line is doing? Are they getting as many riders as they thought they would?
I think at this time, no. And I think a lot has been just a shift in how people work today, remote work, and I don't know the numbers though, but just in general, that has been a comment.
I took to a Vikings game this
Oh.
last year. It's good.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Well,
very full.
The reason I ask that is because the MVTA does not run that. It's run by the, what is it?
Metro Transit.
Metro Transit, yeah. So they're kind of competing with the MVTA.
It provides options for people.
Complimentary service.
Well, the MVTA is probably going more to the Connect situation anyway, to get people from one place to another when they want to go.
Again, it's not a great location relative to where the people live. There's people on the south side of that stop on Parkway and 35 there. If you go south, I don't know if it's still called Bumpers, but there's a apartment back there. I think some of those people walk over and get on the bus. But other than that, there's not a lot. Maybe they come from west side of 35 there. They might walk across and get on the bus there. But other than that, there's not a lot. There's more being developed along Nicollet, so it's close. But that's why I like that Diamond Head area. I think that would be ideal for redevelopment.
Well, they've said that they were going to move all of that stuff over to Metcalf, but now they're not doing that, so I don't think they're really putting that up for development. They're holding it and filling it.
Beth, Jeff, do you have any questions at all, or prompting?
Good discussion.
Yeah. All right. Well, our plan is to take this information and continue to come back to you for feedback. Certainly, there are missing commission members here too, here tonight, so we'd like to get some feedback from them as well, and continue to have conversation as we start to build out the kind of framework and start moving this forward. So you will certainly be engaged. We'll wait for the rest of the commission to get affirmation on if you're supportive of additional meetings, as we'd like you to be a steering committee for this update. So we'll wait, we'll pause on that affirmation. I don't want you to speak for everybody, and in fact, since we don't have a quorum, we'll put
No
that
voting.
on pause for now. But thank you.
All right, thank you, Regina, for all your work on this.
Thank you.
Well, folks, I guess since we don't have a quorum to vote on adjournment, we'll close the meeting with where we are right now.